Greetings, programs, and welcome to another episode of Thumb Wars Presents Blistered Reviews. I'm your host, Sean Cronenfeld, and this time around we'll be taking a look at Ubisoft's Child of Light. Before we get to that, though, I wanted to take a minute to ask you all two questions in advance of a future show. Said questions are this: which was the better game, Super Mario World for the SNES or Sonic the Hedgehog for Sega Genesis? And which console had the better overall library, the SNES or the Genesis? You can either post your answers in the comments section below or email me at sean@channelawesome.com. Either way, I really appreciate your participation in this little mini survey of sorts, and with that out of the way, it's time to get on with the show.
Child, tuck yourself in bed and let me tell a story of Lemuria, a long-lost kingdom, and a girl born for glory. In Austria was a crown land ruled by a duke. Aurora was his daughter, child of a duchess mysterious, beloved by her father. He raised the girl alone. They were rarely apart, till the duke felt lonely and misplaced his heart. It was the Great Friday before Easter 1895. Players performed for the duke, his new bride at his side. That night, Aurora went to sleep. The fire burned down low. She caught a chill that spread. Her skin was cold as snow. At dawn they found her, vacant, Aurora's light gone out. Her father wept and pleaded, but there could be no doubt. For all intents and purposes, Aurora was dead. And yet, once upon a time, she awoke in a strange land instead.
Watch Dogs is a game whose budget is said to be in the range of around $70 million, and when it arrives at the end of this month, with any luck, it will be the terrific gaming experience that Ubisoft has been promising. Yet, even if it does live up to or even exceed its hype, I suspect Watch Dogs will still not be able to match the sheer power and beauty of another Ubisoft release this month, one whose budget was likely not even a quarter of Watch Dogs' size. I say this not as an attack on Watch Dogs, as indeed I'm rather looking forward to the game, but instead to draw attention to the fact that Child of Light is something remarkable and deserving of more attention than it may otherwise be getting. The good: story, characters, gameplay, visuals, audio. The bad: a few rushed late-game subplots. The ugly: nothing. Even the worst monsters and most lifeless wasteland are gorgeous in this game. Child of Light begins as its young protagonist, Aurora, the 10-year-old daughter of a Duke of Austria circa 1895, seemingly succumbs to a fever and breathes her last. In this case, however, death is not the end, and Aurora soon opens her eyes once more, only to find herself in a new and fantastical realm known as Lemuria. Yet for all of Lemuria's considerable beauty, it is a land that has been besieged by darkness and shadows, thanks to its falling under the rule of the Dark Queen, Umbra. Not content to simply control the unusual and varied races which make up Lemuria's population, Umbra has gone so far as to steal the sun, the moon, and the stars, and all in a bid to secure her power once and for all. After an encounter with Igniculus, a magical firefly who can talk and claims to serve the deposed true queen of Lemuria, it soon becomes clear that if Aurora wants to ever return to her home, she'll have to find Lemuria's stolen celestial bodies and restore them to their rightful place in the sky. Fortunately, Aurora has been granted magic of her own that will let her fly and fight the armies of Umbra that wait to bar her path. But even with these abilities and an ever-growing coterie of allies, Aurora's quest will not be an easy one. And all the while, in the shadows of Umbra, dark secrets and revelations await that, once revealed, will change Aurora's life forever. On the surface, Child of Light might just seem to be another fairy tale of good versus evil and darkness versus light. Yet dig deeper, and what waits is something with many layers and potential interpretations to be uncovered, and all drenched in a pervading sense of sorrow and tragedy. This is a game that opens with the death of a small child, after all, and the uneasiness of that, combined with Aurora's seeming obliviousness to her previous fate, creates at times a remarkable amount of tension that will likely as not leave players on edge. Child is a fairy tale, alright, but in the older sense of that term, and bad things aplenty happen to many of people, both deserving and otherwise, over the course of the game. Throw in a series of collectible notes that seem to center on what at first appears to be a wholly unrelated modern-day narrative, and overall, Child gives players plenty to chew on over the course of its rhyme-filled narrative. Matching this narrative is a fun and engaging turn-based RPG combat system that does a terrific job of capturing Aurora's unrelenting determination to reach her goals. She may not be entirely aware of what's going on around her, but nonetheless, Aurora is prepared to fight against the darkness of the world she's become trapped in, even if it means going into battle with a sword almost bigger than she is. And just as Aurora gains hope as the ranks of her companions swell, so too does the gameplay equally continue to expand and present players with a seemingly ever-growing set of options and approaches to winning the day. Child restricts party size to only 2 active members at a time, but does not penalize players for switching party members as many times as they want over the course of a given battle. This in turn makes for combat that encourages experimentation and situational adaptation, especially once late-game skills that can affect the whole party become unlocked. Add in our friendly Firefly, who can even be controlled by a second player for added co-op fun, and who has the ability to slow an enemy's progression on the active time bar or heal wounded friends, and you have a combat system that is simple in design without being overly simplistic in execution. Outside of combat, Child gives players an expansive and gorgeous 2D world to explore, one that's filled with plenty of diversions, secrets, side quests, and more to go along with the main story, to the point that most potential party members in the game are only recruitable by completing some side dungeon or what have you first. Players will also face platforming-like challenges, and the way the game manages to pull these off even after the character gains the ability to fly early on is impressive, puzzles of various stripes, and a fairly uncomplicated crafting system involving jewels, which serve as Child's equivalent to weapons, armor, and accessories. While some may bemoan the lack of shops and other more complicated elements that tend to come standard in RPGs these days, I personally believe that Child is fleshed out just enough to keep the game compelling without getting too bogged down in elements that might have distracted from the game's story. I've never accepted the idea that there can even be a question about the legitimacy of video games as art. And yet I can't deny that more often than not, video games, even great ones, can be fairly surface affairs, where what you see is what you get, and there's little in the way of abstract or larger ideas at play. There are exceptions, of course, but all too often that's exactly what they are. Exceptions. There's nothing wrong with a game just being fun, of course, and indeed, something like the previously released Kirby Triple Deluxe, or the upcoming Mario Kart 8, are just as legitimate and important of releases as anything else. Video games can and should be fun, as indeed Child of Light is, but they can also sometimes have greater aspirations as well. That's why Child is such a special game. It's not content to just be fun, but instead seeks to use the familiar frameworks of fairy tales, 2D platformers, and RPGs as a way of creating a story and a world whose narrative and general visuals attempt something more nuanced. This is a game whose beauty is far more than just skin deep, and in the years ahead, I fully expect it to join the ranks of games considered great works of art such as Journey and Gone Home. And to think, it all comes to us largely from the same developers who also developed Far Cry 3. It just goes to show the kind of possibilities that can exist when big studios are prepared to go beyond the confines of the AAA. Score, 9 out of 10. Must own. Recommendation, buy it now.